Hey everybody, you got David Abrams here along with Joel Erway, our guest this week from the Webinar Academy. I just want to thank everyone for coming out. Really appreciate your guys' time. As always on this show, we'll be going through Joel's story, how he got started on his journey as a founder. I'm going to ask lots of questions. He is, like I said, the founder of the Webinar Agency, so I think you can have a lot of really cool insight and knowledge for everyone who's joining us today. I'm going to try to steal as much information as I can from your brain. I want to take it. I want to put it into our campaigns, but I really want to hear from you as well. Guys, as always, this is totally interactive, so make sure you say hi in the chat right now. For those of you who joined early, I had it on chat as private, but it should automatically change. We put a new update in that'll automatically change that for you guys. So if you don't see chat is public at the top, just refresh your screen and you'll have a public chat. For all you guys, we'll have questions throughout the entire thing. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, David, what's going on? Or Dave, I'm sorry. Hey, Vasilis, how you doing? What's going on? Joel, thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, David, man, I'm super stoked, super pumped, and ready to share as much knowledge as I can while at the same time testing out Demio for myself. And this thing is, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty pumped about this.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. I'm glad you get to experience it like this. I think this is one of the best ways to do it, to experience it. And, you get the interaction from everyone here who's just so amazing. Dave, you are an amazing user of ours. We love to brag about you internally here. Matt, this is absolutely going to be shared, the recording. We store everything on demio.com/inside. This is our internal blog. We put great content on there along with all these recordings and show notes. We also have an iTunes podcast now launched with these shows. We are going to be launching an announcement to everyone this week. So stay tuned for that. We're going to do kind of a cool thing there for that announcement. Now, one of the other things I want to say before we jump in here, we have a lot to cover, so I'll kind of move fast. But today is our first episode where we're making our big new social movement. And with the help of Joel, we've chosen the Susan G. Komen Organization today to be our charitable contribution today. So as of right now, we'll kind of count the registrations throughout. Right now, we have about 93 registrations. So we're going to be donating for every single person that signed up. So this is going to be something totally free that we do, just something that we want to do to give back and kind of thank the guests for coming on. So they get to choose the charity each week. And because of you guys signing up, because of you guys joining, we'll be making that donation right after this show, which is really amazing. And in fact, let me just put, I just want to put this real fast, Joel, if you don't mind, the link to this organization this is just a great, great charity. If you guys ever want to just take a look at it yourselves, there's no pressure, but just kind of something that we're doing to give back to the social cause. Also, guys, at the end, I'm going to be giving away something for free. I'm going to give away kind of a special bonus. So stay till the end. We'll do something kind of fun as kind of a giveaway. Now, let's go ahead. We'll jump right in. Joel, that was kind of a long intro. But listen, man, I know you have an amazing journey. We got to meet and to interact at a secret mastermind about, 2 weeks ago now?
Yeah, it was down in Orlando, and it was a blast. But I knew that when you were at the event, I'm like, dude, I got to connect with you. I got to pick your brain, and we have to swap ideas. And so I'm glad that we finally did connect afterwards. And I'm excited and honored to be on the show. And I got to give you credit, man. When you asked me what charity to donate to, I mean, I've never had anyone do that before. Mm-hmm. And it's a testament to the social cause that you guys are promoting, and so I really do appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And because the breast cancer is long running history in my family, and so just supporting that is it means a lot. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely, and it's actually close to me too. I mean, in my family as well. So I definitely love that cause, and it was a great organization to pick. So good for you. And guys, I want to just say, every week as we do these charities, you definitely invite people out to the show. This is just, our cause to help the world. So the Demio Discover show is really just to help everyone, free content. There's never anything for sale on these shows. It's just about getting as much information as we can for everyone here. So just kind of our little give back. Now, Joel, let's take a step back. I want to hear how you got started, how you even got to the webinar agency. Obviously, you guys are working with 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs building their webinars, their scripts, stuff like that. You do a lot of these audits. How did you get here? Where did you start? Where did you start from? And how did you even get to be an entrepreneur?
It's a really fun story to talk about. And down in Orlando, I was talking to another attendee who was at this mastermind, Jack Bourne, who runs Deadline Funnels, another great guy and a great tool to pair up with your webinar funnels. And we went out to lunch a couple of weeks before the mastermind down in St. Augustine, and he asked me this question. He goes, "Joel, tell me your story." And so after I told him the story, he's like, "Dude, that needs to be like, you need to connect with Andre, who is going to be at the event, and you need to build this story into like your email sequences because it's awesome." So, so let me tell you that I'll try and keep it condensed because I can be a little long-winded. But I didn't go into entrepreneurship saying I'm going to be the webinar guy, right? It's a very niche, very specific thing to pick, and I certainly didn't do that. My journey into entrepreneurship actually started before I even did the online business. So my background is in engineering. So I went to school for mechanical engineering. Out of school, I took a job as an HVAC designer for commercial buildings. So I was designing big rooftop commercial air handlers and heating and cooling systems. So I did that for about 8 months. I was really sitting behind a desk drawing computer CAD and drawings, and I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't sit behind a desk. So I transitioned into a new role with a new company where I was selling that equipment that I was designing to my coworkers. So I was a sales engineer selling all of those heating and cooling systems. And that was my first experience into business. I didn't take any business classes when I was in school. This was my first kind of throw you into the fire and figured out no sales experience entering this job. 100% commission only sales. Or commission only position. So I ate what I killed. And if I didn't sell anything, I didn't make any money, which I support 100%, but that's the story for another day. But that's the true testament of an entrepreneur. Like if you can live that way, then you are destined for this world because it's a very lonely, very roller coaster world. So after about 2 or 3 years, I was responsible for growing a brand new territory. We had, no presence in Buffalo, New York. We were opening up a new office. So they said, "Joel, we want you to go create new sales and create opportunity in this market." Doing it for about 2 or 3 years, it was a lot of hard work, and we relied heavily on sales presentations to contractors and engineers. And we would bring in these manufacturers of all these products that we represented and that we sold. And we would go into their office and say, "Can we do a presentation for you?" We would bring in the manufacturer, we would do a presentation, and hopefully that would turn into a sale or a project or whatever. After about 2 or 3 years, it was very, very slow growth. We were beating our heads against a wall. And I decided that I saw a huge opportunity with the presentations that they could be improved because a lot of times these presentations, the engineers would fall asleep and it was just making very, very little impact. And I looked at the rest of our company and nobody else was giving the presentations. They were relying on the manufacturer to give the presentation, which I didn't like because I'm putting my paycheck in the hands of somebody else, or how somebody else performs. Mm-hmm. So our manufacturers were located all around the country. So I'd be flying to these different locations, and every time that I was at a layover in an airport on these trips, I would go into the bookstores in the airports and I would buy books on how to give better presentations. And so I was doing that for a few months and I was reading them on my trips. And after a while, I started to see a pattern saying, okay, they're all doing something, that we're not doing. And they would frame it in a different way. But I started to build my own sales presentations for these products. So after a while, I decided to do my own presentations. And when I did that, that's when that was the first time that everything really changed. When I gave my presentations versus relying on my manufacturers, then people trusted me and I gave much better content. And I framed it in a way that I wasn't teaching them the specifics, but I was giving them the potential of what life could be like when they implemented our systems and what were our benefits to our systems. So that was the big shift, number one.
Can I pause you right there?
What's that?
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
I want to ask questions on that. So although you were in sales, how did you know how to formulate that presentation? Were you nervous? Like when you were first, because you're the first one kind of changing the systems of the company, kind of throwing things up and mixing it up. Were you nervous? Like, how did you know this was going to be the right fit? Or did you just say, hey, I'm going to shoot from the hip and see what happens?
I was terrified. It was definitely, I was probably 24 at the time, 23, 24. And a lot of my customers were much older. The engineering world, they're much older. Probably, the youngest engineers that I present to would be in their late 30s, early 40s, many of which were much older than that. And so for me to come in and give these presentations on why our products are better, they're constantly firing objections at me. And I was able to learn quickly how to handle that. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I was absolutely terrified, but I had nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose as a 100% commission-only salesperson, which is important.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so were you just using some of these prior sales calls to know the objections that people were already going to have? So you used the sales calls to gather feedback, gather the objections, and then you kind of knew how to formulaically put it into a presentation, and you're like, hey, this is what I've used before. I think this is going to work on this presentation.
That's a great question. And so after a while, when you do presentations and when you talk to your customers long enough, you start to know what their objections are going to be for almost any product, right? And when you find that common thread, you start to realize that they really only care about what it can do for them, and they don't really care about the whole overall benefits. And that was the biggest difference that we made between having my manufacturers give the presentations and having me give the presentations, because I'm talking to my customers. I know what they want. They want us to do all the work for them. They don't care about, they might say that they want a more efficient money-making system, but it's not saving them money. They're doing it for their clients. And so those types of benefits were what manufacturers would promote. But the real benefits that we had to change were how we could help reduce the workload on the customers. And when I changed that, that's when we really started to make some big headway.
That's amazing. And I think there's a very valuable lesson in there for most people on this call. So a couple of things. One is talk to your customers, learn what the real benefits are, like understand those objections. And the other thing is kind of people don't necessarily care about the features or the benefits or any of those things. They just really care about what it's going to do for them. So I think that's gold that we just found right there. But continue your story, please. So you did this presentation. How'd it go? What happened there?
Yeah, so I started doing the presentations, and I was making headway. So people were calling me in to set up projects and take the next steps. And we went from basically zero sales to, I'd say, around like 500,000 to $1 million per year. And so in my territory in Buffalo, that's great because we didn't have anything. I'd say on average, the average salesperson in upstate New York was doing like 1.5 million per year in sales in their territory. The best salesperson was at the peak did I think 7 million. On average, they did about 1.5. So that was kind of the threshold that I was shooting for. So I was growing that, took that to about $2 million a year in sales after 4 or 5 years. And my territory started to expand, right? So this is now the transition. We're going to go into the transition to my entrepreneurship world. As I started being more successful in growing the territory, my company gave me more territories to work on, which was a blessing and a curse because it was very old school. They wanted me to go in person to all of these customers, like literally knock on their door and say, hey, what are you working on? Can we help you out with anything? Which is not efficient at all, especially when you have 300 miles of territory to cover. It's just very inefficient. So I started looking at ways to be more efficient, and I discovered email marketing. I mean, like at this point, I had no experience with online marketing, and I literally found MailChimp and like, I looked at MailChimp like, so I can send an email and I can track who opens this and who clicks it. And like, I already saw the benefits of what that would give me. I could see what products people were interested in, and we could have more effective sales calls. Mm-hmm. So my company was very old school. They weren't open to new things, so I did it without telling them. And I just started this twice a week newsletter where I would write up an article about our products and see who opened it, and would custom tailor, my calls to who was interested. After a month of doing this, we booked almost $500,000 in new business from customers that I had never even worked with before. And so after I had that result, I brought it to my boss and I said, listen, this is what email marketing can do. This is why we should do it. Mind you, the MailChimp account was free. I only had like 150 people on my list. So like they didn't charge me until I hit like 1,000. So it would have been free for life. He was like, okay.
What was the size of these deals? Like, for every sale that you made?
So that one deal was like $450K. So I booked a new deal for $450K. It was actually 3 projects, but same one, it was cookie cutter. So it was like 150K times 3. So it was $450,000 in products that we needed to sell. Like there were certain products that we had to focus on. And so that was a huge, huge win. And I was getting responses from other people who had never contacted me before, and we were making great progress. And I didn't have to go out and cold call all these people all the time, right? So lots of benefits with what happened there. So I brought it to my boss, and I said, hey, listen, this is what I did. Here's the results. This is what we need to do. So he looked at me, and he goes, okay, we'll do it, but you're not doing it. Give it to the assistant. And at that point, I was like, okay, we were butting heads on some other things too. And so I'm like, it's time to part ways, because what he saw it as me trying to develop a way to get out of doing more work, like driving to these offices and not being more efficient. So anyway, that was my first spark into entrepreneurship. So any questions thus far? You want me to keep going?
No, you can keep going. But a question here, like, so you got to the point of just frustration. And I know that feeling when you feel like you're being contained and you have all these great ideas, they just can't see them. What was that feeling when you decided to say, I'm going to take the leap, I'm going to do it? I mean, is it terrifying at this moment? Is it, where are you? Like, how do you feel?
Yeah, so it was pretty scary. I had started to tinker around with some things on the side. I wrote a Kindle book on Amazon on how to pass the engineering licensing exam. That ended up being a bestseller on Amazon, which anyone who has written books on Amazon, it doesn't take much to become a bestseller, but I was a bestseller, and it hit number 1 like right away, which was pretty cool because I didn't have a list, didn't have anything. I just, I wrote the book, and it still sells probably 10 copies a month. Like this was 3 years ago, so it still sells on its own, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's true passive income, which is awesome. But so I tested that out, and I'm like, okay, well, I think I can make this work. So I made a leap of faith, and I left. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so when I left, my first idea was I joined a mentorship program to try and learn how to build a software business and live the passive income lifestyle of recurring income through software.
That's a hard one to first jump into. That's a tough one.
Man, you're not kidding. Like, that was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. I met a lot of cool people in that group, and I learned some good lessons of entrepreneurship. I did a lot of cold calling, cold emailing, and idea extraction, as they called it. And but it didn't materialize in anything, which is fine. I mean, like, that's the life of entrepreneurship. I'm not regretting it. It was a good experience to go through, but you're right, man. Building software as your first entrepreneurship venture, like, I would not recommend that to anybody who's just getting started out.
Just so many pitfalls. There's so many pitfalls that you can run into, but yeah, totally. So you got all these ideas, and I think what I'm just gathering is that you've done such a good job, and you kind of, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, sometimes hesitate talking to potential customers or doing the cold reach out or doing these new initiatives. Like, sounds like you kind of, you act first, and then you ask for forgiveness afterwards. You don't ask for permission. You kind of just take the initiative, which is just a great approach to doing things. You just take an action and seeing what's working. So I think that's amazing. But take us what happens next.
So that was a 6-month program, and it was pretty expensive. It was like $5,000 or $6,000, for an investment, which at the time I didn't have any income coming or revenue coming in for my business. But it was just straight out of my savings, which was fine. I learned a lot and made a lot of good connections. After that, I realized that, like, they didn't really teach you how to market and sell in that program. So I needed to learn how to market and sell online, which I had not done. So I at this point, after 6 months, my wife was, like, very nervous, and she's like, okay, like, you left. You don't have any revenue coming in. You have no income coming in. Like, if I'll support you, but only for so long. There needs to be an end date to this. So we sat down we went out, I remember it was Monday night. There was a wine special at one of our local bars that we went to. So we sat down, and I was going to hire Russell Brunson to be my marketing mentor for a year, which at the time was $10K, that level of a coaching program. And so I'm like, I heard about this Russell Brunson guy. I think that he can really help me market. I was going into a new direction. I was going to do an info product course, helping engineers with their career development. I'm like, I need to hire a marketing guy to help me sell this. So she's like, okay, but if this doesn't fail, you have to go and get a job. I'm like, deal. So I put a deadline, and I saw that I had to make this work. Otherwise, I was going to go back to a JOB. Mm-hmm. So
the dreaded JOB.
The dreaded JOB. So I still had no idea about webinars at this point. Started the program with Russell, and Russell's really big on webinars. And so he's like, okay, man, so build a webinar funnel. That's how you're going to sell your course. So I did it for about 3, 4, 5 months or so, was pumping ad dollars into it, learning how to do Facebook ads, learning how to create marketing messages. Like, it was a lot of work. And I was selling some things. I did sell a few copies via webinar, but it wasn't lighting the world on fire. And I definitely didn't have enough to bring in enough income to pay myself and keep pumping ad dollars. And so after about 5 months, I ran out of money, and I'm like, well, I need to get money because I need to figure out how to pay this. I want to continue this entrepreneurship path, so I need to hustle. So I called up Russell and I said, hey man, I'm out of money, and love what you're doing. Like, love your advice, but I just ran out of cash. And, can I sell? I know you're still promoting your coaching program, so can I be a phone salesperson for you and sell your program? He's like, sorry, man, I don't have any openings right now, but let me connect you with somebody who's looking for a phone salesperson. He's a coaching client of his. And he goes, I think that there might be a good fit there. His name was Jason. So I connected with him. And so he's like, all right, cool, man. Well, what I want you to do is I want you to follow up with all my leads who hopped on my webinar but didn't buy. Follow up with them, ask them why they didn't buy, and try and get them to purchase. Mind you, I had no phone sales experience at all. I was just like hustle mentality, like, I'm going to find a way to make this work.
Do whatever it takes.
Yep. So he goes, before you call these people, watch the webinar so you know what you're selling, and then just start calling the leads. So I watched the webinar, and I was like, hey man, like, how are you doing with this webinar? Like, how many sales you're making? And he goes, we're about break even. It was $1,000 program. And he's like, we sell anywhere between 0, 1, or 2 copies a week. So wow. We need to figure out how to make this work. And he was doing it live each week. So he was pumping ad dollars, doing it live once a week, and selling that volume. So I'm like, well, I see an opportunity with this. So let me try and rework your webinar, and I'll pitch it for you. And if it doesn't work, then I'll call your leads, whatever, like no big deal. And, we'll just do it for a percentage of sales. Mm-hmm. He goes, absolutely, man. I hate doing webinars, but I just know I need to do them, but I hate doing them. So by all means, give it a shot. So I reworked it, and over the course of 2 weeks, I revised it. And on that Thursday, I'll never forget, on that Thursday, I delivered it on his behalf. So I pitched the whole webinar, and at the end, we checked the sales, and we did 14 sales live. And nice. It was like mind blowing. Like, when you go weeks without making any sales, or you just make 1 or you make 2, and then you go and you make 14 the first time somebody else does it for you. I mean, like, he lost his mind. I mean, he went completely bananas. And actually a week, I started doing it weekly for him. And like the next week he went out and bought a brand new car, and it was nuts. And so that's when I realized that was my big opportunity with webinars. And that was the launch of the webinar agency. And that was just over 2 years ago.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. That's amazing. So, I mean, what do you think was the key thing that kind of shifted? So when you were selling your own program, you were pumping ads in, you couldn't really get consistent sales. He was doing his, he wasn't getting really consistent sales, getting maybe 1 or 2. What do you think the shift was from you looking at his webinar to where you were? Was it the offer? Was it how he was angling? Or was it the person pitching it? What do you think was kind of the major things looking back now on why, like, maybe there was a little bit of like a marketing message that might have been off on either one of them, and you were able to kind of fix that?
Yeah, so it's really important to understand the importance of hiring a coach or hiring consultants, especially when you're the product owner, because as the product owner and the business owner, you're way too close to your product. Now, that's not to say that you can't create your own successful webinar, but you really have to detach yourself from what you've built, because you're the expert. You know everything to a fine-tooth comb. Like, you can go a mile deep in your expertise, but you have to understand the person that you're selling it to is 10 miles behind you. So you have to speak to them as if they were way back there. And that's when I do webinar breakdown calls and I review somebody's existing webinar, that's the missing link 10 times out of 10 is that like they're not really speaking to their ideal customer and they're doing too much technobabble and they're doing too much teaching on the webinar. The whole goal with the webinar is not to shrink your course into a 60-minute presentation, which is like the second biggest mistake most people do. They say, here's the course that I'm teaching you. I want to cram it into 60 minutes and hopefully you'll understand what I'm trying to teach you. And at the end, you'll take action and join my course. And that's the wrong way to go about it. And so the biggest mistake that people make is they're not speaking directly to what the customer wants and what their desires are and what their problems are. And it's easier said than done. I mean, I can tell you till you're blue in the face, like that's your problem, but a real expert has to go in and put themselves in the shoes of their customer, of that potential customer, and say, what are they really looking for? What do they want? Is this, are you speaking too in depth, or do you have to take a step back and explain the concepts to them before you go down the rabbit hole?
That's awesome. So you also had, that's great advice, first of all, but you had some experience prior talking to customers and you were really good at pulling out the pain points, the benefits, what they're really looking for. Do you still take that approach ever where you try to find the market validation by talking to people, getting on phone calls? Or are you doing like an avatar worksheet where you're just kind of digging into research? Like, how do you guys approach it now that you know that that's so important? How do you guys kind of get the real data for the pain points of your audience? Because a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we're creating we're creating products and we're saying, this is what I think the problems are. We have the problem, but we don't really know if everyone else has it. So how are you kind of doing that validation process to know what are those pains? What do you need to talk about?
Man, I wish that it was true where I would talk to all the customers first and ask them, but it's really not. Right now, I've done it for so long that you can make educated guesses on what their true pain points are and what they really want, especially I'll give you an example. I've built 5 sales webinars for people who want to learn how to make money on Amazon. So like I've had course creators and consultants and coaches hire me to build an Amazon webinar presentation for them. So I know what the key pain points are. It goes for pretty much any business opportunity webinar. We're going in the self-development and the personal development niche. We've got a couple that I'm building right now. That's the most difficult niche that I've ever built a webinar for, because you want to walk this fine line of being like woo-woo and hey, the world is great. And like, you have to be able to pull intangible things and describe them as tangible results. Otherwise they're not going to comprehend what you're really trying to say to them.
Right.
But after a while, you just kind of learn that there are like really some core desires that people want. People want to learn how to make more money. They want freedom. They want security. They want safety. Like those key desires framed in different messages are really what we kind of go on right now. So,
got it.
Yeah.
So those are the 5 key desires that you look at, and then you're breaking those 5 key desires down for that specific vertical, and then you're just kind of reframing it around whatever specific idea or product idea you have.
So those aren't the only key desires and key problems. I've actually never listed them.
I'm trying to steal your information here. I want to know.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I've never been asked that question before, so it was kind of coming off the top of my head. So it's not like I have 4 or 5 key desires, but I can say that like a lot of them are very like we take common desires and common pain points that we've taken from previous webinars and all the different sales presentations, and you just kind of go with that. I mean, it's in my experience, there are not many obscure pain points that you're not going to be able to make assumptions about. And that might be a little counterintuitive with what some people are teaching, but because I've done this for so many webinars, you start to see patterns, and we take those patterns, we apply them to other presentations. That's
awesome. Okay. So now that you put together the presentation, you have, the desires, you're really working on, the key pain points. How do you guys measure whether these are doing well? What are you guys using as far as like, is there a measurement of engagement, a measurement of interactivity, or is it just based on ROI from driving ads to the webinar?
Good question. It all depends on the market. And I'll give you some examples so you can have so your audience knows kind of what we're looking at. But everyone's looking for like, what are your standard metrics? What should I be looking at? Like, it all comes down to your market, it comes down to price point, and it comes down to the style of webinar that you're doing. Okay, so let's start with the style. So there are two different style webinars that you can do when you're building a sales presentation. You can do direct selling, where you're selling a product on the end for, if it's a coaching product or whatever it is, right? But the call to action at the end of the presentation is take out your credit card, submit your order online, and then we'll fulfill. The other style is more application style, lead generation webinar, which is all about high ticket selling. Like, hey, here's the webinar at the end, hop on, submit your information and we'll hop on the phone or we'll take the next steps, whatever it is. But there's no transaction that takes place at the end of that webinar. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to direct selling, whether we're selling courses or whatever we're selling at the end, you can do live or you can do automated, right? So the way that we kind of measure the results is based on sales based on the registration. So people always say, well, how many sales should I have, at the end of a live webinar? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, it's hard to measure because people are coming on all the time and they're dropping off all the time, and you don't really know what point to measure how many attendees you had on it at a certain point. It's just it's too dynamic to put a direct figure on. So we say if you're selling $1,000 product, which nobody's going to hire me if they're selling $100 product. Like they're just not going to.
ROI's not there.
Right, it's not there, and I want it. The way that I operate is we do cold traffic webinar funnels. And so, $500 price points and above, usually only $1,000 price points and above are really what we work on. So at that price point level, we shoot for a bare minimum 1% registration to sale conversion ratio. Now, we've had clients that are much higher than that, but if you're below 1%, something's wrong with your message. Like, that's the indicator that we look for. If you're below 1%, then there's something wrong with our webinar message or our funnel, and we have to do some serious rework. Now, 1% and above, then we just start really fine-tuning and do some, our message is probably pretty much dialed in, and we're looking at optimization metrics. So we're doing retargeting, or we're looking at fine-tuning our audience on the front end, reworking our ad, lowering our cost per lead. Then it starts getting into optimization. But if we're below 1%, then we know that our webinar message is off, or our audience is way off. So we could have the best message in the world, but if we're marketing to the wrong audience, it's not going to make a difference.
So that's a tough problem. And I definitely have seen it before, and I've talked about it before. It's like those are the two major issues you'll have. You either have wrong audience or wrong marketing message, or offer could be wrong. But those are the two areas. How do you decipher which is which? I've never been able to really have a good kind of assessment there, but maybe you do.
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. How to decipher?
I don't know if it's the answer though. Yeah, I don't know.
So we've never had a major audience issue. So, I mean, with most of the traffic that we get is from Facebook, and to be 100% transparent, we don't do anything on the traffic side, but we will help consult with it. So if they're running their own traffic, or if they've got a traffic guys, I mean, we'll take a peek and see if there's anything glaringly wrong, because we know traffic, but we just don't want to take on that liability because that's too many points of failure for us to take on as a responsibility for a provider. And it's not that we've done it in the past, but there's enough for us to look at with just the webinar and the webinar funnel itself that you throw on traffic. I mean, we might as well build it ourselves, build the program and sell it on our own. I mean, it's might as well launch the business, right? So
everything.
Yeah. And so we will help consult with traffic, and we haven't seen major. I mean, if your cost per webinar registration lead is above $10, then something's wrong. I mean, then it's usually an audience issue. But
where's the hot spot that you're going for cost per lead?
Very market specific, very, very market specific. So if you're in the internet marketing space and you're promoting to other internet marketers, I mean, we'll pay $15 per lead. But
wow.
I've got two clients right now that have converted. This is a niche that I'm going to go after. They've converted their infomercials into webinars, and they're crushing it. One of which is in the piano niche, and he's getting $3 to $5 cost per lead, and we're going to be able to get that down much lower than that. I've never seen somebody with such a low cost per click, but we're using were using another webinar platform, and I do believe that their landing page is actually the culprit for why we can't get above a 12% registration rate. And it's like, I've seen it with a couple other users too. So anyway, we're going to be experimenting with that, and I would love to test out Demio with them as well. So
definitely have to do that. Real fast, Spencer has a good question while we're on the subject, and we're kind of in the Q&A section, guys. So if you have questions, submit them right now. We'll get them answered by Joel here. He has a lot of knowledge on this stuff. How do you ensure your audience has the cash to pay for your product? So this kind of goes back to some of that audience research that you're doing earlier. And especially if you're opening a new product or a new program, how do you make sure you're not like fishing in the wrong pond?
Yeah, good question. So for the clients that we take on, we only take on clients that have actually sold the product before. And so but that's from a company standpoint. That's from the webinar agency standpoint. So like, that's not really a main concern that we hit right out the gate. Like, we won't take on clients that are just launching a new business. It's just too much of a risk for us, and it doesn't make the most sense. So, but let's take a step back, and let's say that, we're helping students who are just launching their own product. And it's like, you have to look at what other people are selling. Like, you don't want to create something that nobody else has sold before for that exact reason. So I'll tell a story about this because this is what happened with me. In my engineering career development course that I sold, I ran into this issue. I was trying to sell it at $9.97, but I was attracting broke people. So the hook into the webinar was how to ace your next job interview, right? As an engineer, how to crush your next job interview. So I taught them all my secrets about how to perfect the perfect interview. What that was doing, and at the end, I was originally selling a $1,000 career development course, which was great, but I didn't sell any at $9.97. What I was doing, which I didn't understand, but Russell did tell me in the very beginning, he goes, I don't think that you should be doing this. You're going to attract broke people. But I was attracting people who were unemployed. Like, obviously, like, if you're unemployed, you're looking for a job, what's the first thing that you're going to do? You're going to go to a job interview, right? So I'm attracting it was the wrong bait to get the people in. So I dropped the price, and eventually, like, the sweet spot that I found was like $3.97 or, maybe $4.97. I can't remember. But the problem was, like, I still had to run paid traffic. And as we talked about before, you got to get an ROI from your paid traffic. And at $300 or $400, like, it's going to be pretty difficult if you don't have another method to monetize it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do market research with that. And I didn't see if anybody else was selling an engineering career development course for $1,000. And I lost a lot of money doing that.
That's a common thing, though. I think a lot of people kind of run into that because, like, the idea is good, the intentions are good, but the market research isn't, like, it's just not dug in deep enough. And I think it goes back to something you said earlier, which was really having, putting yourself in the position of the avatar. Like, who is this person? Who am I? And like, we always talk about the avatar worksheet here. We have an avatar worksheet that we give away in the academy. And it really helps you kind of understand, like, who is this person? What's their job? What's their day look like? The more you can put yourself in the position, in the seat of that avatar, the more you can kind of think of, how much money do I have in the bank? Am I going to be willing to pay for that amount of stuff? And that's honestly, Spencer, one of the reasons why I love B2B is that you're dealing with people in business that have marketing budgets they're going to sell. If you're dealing with B2C, a lot of times in consumer-based products and offerings, you really have to understand, like, how much of a need is that product to that person. They're going to be willing to shell out X amount of dollars. And there has to be real proven, I guess, ROI or like return on investment, which doesn't have to always be money for consumer-based stuff for them to buy. But cool. There's lots of questions coming in here. So we'll just grab some here. Christian, Christian says, is there a webinar outline or template you use? Oh, go ahead. Did you want to add to that?
There is. Christian, if you wouldn't mind, we'll get to your question in a second. But David, you were talking about B2C versus B2B. And I would like to interject there because 100% true, like 150% true. Like, you have to be able to work with people who have marketing budgets to invest. If you're just getting started out, you need revenue, and that's like the low hanging fruit, right? We are looking to test a B2C webinar. I've got a couple people who are interested, and so like right now we're so like whenever this kind of goes into my model about 100% commission only. Like right now we're doing we're looking to test with 7-figure e-commerce store owners because I do think there's a huge opportunity to recapture some abandoned shopping cart leads and convert them with a webinar and push them even into a high average cart value purchase. And so, but that's down the road, right? And that's, but I do think that like webinars, it's has not been, at least not that I've seen, has not been explored yet using webinars B2C. But I would not, like right out the gate, I would not do it starting out. I would not create a webinar because it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. But I think that it's a huge opportunity for B2C with the large e-commerce stores.
I think if you do really community-driven webinars, really webinars that bring interaction and engagement, that could be really powerful for B2C because most people that are on these stores and especially e-commerce stores and stuff like that typically buy not just for the products, but for the feel of the brand and being a part of that community of the brand. So just top of mind, just spitting that out there. That could be a cool thing when you guys get there.
Yep, 100%.
All right, so let's jump on Christian's question. Is there a webinar outline or template that you guys are using, or is it just something you guys are coming up with yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, we follow a flow, and we do, like in my course, I talk about a template and an outline that we use, and essentially, it's like if you've never heard of what the marketing awareness pyramid is, you guys all need to go Google that right now. Like I know Dan Kennedy talks about it. Todd Brown talks about all the big name marketers. Like they know what the marketing awareness pyramid is, right? So from a very, very quick perspective, if you start at the top, if you look at the pyramid, right, it's split up in like 4 or 5 segments. I don't know all of them by heart, but at the very top are the people who are most educated on what you're selling, the product that you're selling, the problems that you're helping them solve, and they're in the consideration phase. Like they're ready to buy, they've committed to making a purchase, but they're choosing between you and your competitors, right? It's a very, very small segment of the total market audience, but those are the people who are about ready to buy. Then the step down below that are people who are in the solution phase. So they know what the problem is, they've heard about your product, and you're educating them on what your product does to solve them, right? So the market starts to expand at that point, but they're not yet ready to buy. Down below that is what did I just say? The solution or the product?
I think the solution, but it's just solution or product and solution.
Yeah, so I got them flip-flopped. But anyway, you're basically solving the solution for them. And then the step down below that is they're only problem aware. So you approach them, you get into their world by speaking at the problem, but you don't even talk about your product yet. And then down below that is they're completely unaware. So if you look at that pyramid, that's essentially the flow of our webinars. So we start in the very introduction as if they were unaware. And then we keep funneling them up because there's a lot of education in that process. And so at the event that David and I were at, when I've known about the marketing awareness pyramid and I've done all of my webinars in that flow, but when he put that slide up there, I'm like, that's the webinar. That's what that's why cold traffic webinars work. And that's why if you look at the ones that don't work is because they start at a different level and they're not starting at the bottom and working their way up. So they're not starting at the unawareness phase and educating them on what the problem is and showing them what the solutions are, then introducing them to the product and then pushing them into making a decision, leading them into making a decision, I should say. You should never push them, but you lead them into making an educated decision. That's what makes a cold traffic webinar work so well. So I could tell you what my format is, but that pyramid is my format in a nutshell.
That's really amazing. I love to hear that. And as you explained that, and I'm just thinking about, Todd talking about the pyramid, that made so much sense in my head and how you kind of are moving them up there. And it makes me think about my own webinar. I probably don't start in the unaware phase. We definitely start in the problem or solution aware phase. So definitely good feedback for everyone to think about. Really dial in on this level of awareness stuff, because when we went through this at the mastermind, it really opened in my mind some of my languaging, how I'm talking to a lot of people. And you guys might find that you're talking to people that are often most aware or product aware, and you're leaving out, and that's a small percentage of people. So you really are leaving out a lot of room that hits conversion rates, that hits cost per leads and stuff like that.
And what you do is, if you don't acknowledge the people who aren't aware of that, and you only speak to the people who are at the top of that pyramid, the other people feel like they're in the wrong place. So it kills your conversions. That's the biggest mistake that you make, is when you don't take a step back and you say, and and you assume that people know something about your market or about whatever range that you're talking about, if you assume they know it and they don't, you lose them. But if you take the time to take a step back and you educate people again and just reinforce, like, here's why this is important, even the people who already know why it's important, you won't lose them. You'll just reinforce that they're in the same spot. But if you do it backwards, you lose the big section of the market that's down below, because they're going to feel like they're in the wrong place because they're not there yet. So that's the biggest mistake that you can possibly make, is assuming that they know something that they don't.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Matt asks, and you kind of already answered this, but you kind of are doing this in your business already, like as the actual webinar agency. Do you have a webinar flow, slides, data? Do you develop a webinar flow specifically, I guess, to sell client-centric SEO services? He's asking. What I guess the question, Matt, if I'm not butchering your question, is what does your webinar flow look like specifically for client-centric services? Is it different than a B2B product offering like a membership or something like that?
So this goes into the application style webinar. So like if you're selling services, you have to take it from a little bit of a different angle. You really have to identify where your audience is in the pyramid again. Now with B2B and client-centric services, you're approaching people who have money to spend, and you have to know if they're already aware of the problem. Let me give you an example. Okay. So if I were to create a webinar on how to run profitable Facebook ads, right? There's a good chance that the people that want to buy my services already know about Facebook ads. Now I'm making an assumption. I don't know that market well enough to know if that's true, but you want to go for people who can pay $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month to manage your Facebook accounts or whatever it is that you're charging, right? So you have to know that your market, you don't have to educate them on why Facebook ads are the greatest thing since sliced bread. Or maybe you do, but it's all about where your audience is. And when we do high ticket webinars, as we'll call them, that's what it's known in the industry, right? The high ticket webinars or the client generation webinars, like it's all about how are you different from everybody else, and like why should they be calling you to implement this system? So I would be focusing my attention more on, okay, if I've got SEO services, I want to know, like, how are you going to help me specifically? Like, I'm a coach. Why do I need SEO? Or I'm a local HVAC shop. Why do I need SEO? Or I've already hired all these other SEO companies, like, but it didn't work. So how are you different? So it's almost about differentiating whatever you are and what your system is. And that's how I would differentiate it, is creating a system, a unique mechanism, as Todd called it. And that's what you have to differentiate yourself with.
I was absolutely going to go there if you didn't hit on it. But I think with services, especially with something like SEO services, where you have a lot of competition, there's a lot of other agencies. There's going to be like two buckets, really, like two levels of awareness. The people that want to grow their business and they want to bring in more leads and sales. They don't know how. So you got to educate them on why SEO might be the best route to go. It's organic. It's free over time, blah, 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 whatever your benefits are for SEO. The other bucket is people that know SEO. They know they should do it. They don't have a good system to do it, and they're not getting rankings. Both have different objections, and those are two very different buckets. So you have to be clear on that. Objections on one is, I've been burned by other SEO agencies. They've cost too much. I've never seen rankings. An agency did our rankings and they, lost us everything because they did some black hat stuff. Maybe they bought black hat stuff before, whatever, right? So each one has their own. But the key thing here is, I think, exactly like Joel just said, have a unique mechanism. What makes your system of doing SEO different and better? What is there a thing that you do uniquely that no other company does? Do you guys have the best customer service, the best client management? Are you looking at rankings differently? Are you looking at long-term rankings? Like, how can you sell in a very specific way to them? And then I think also, whenever you guys are doing client-centric services, you have to use case studies and testimonials. Those are so important for studying that way or selling that way, because they get to sell it through real feedback versus you just making claims about what you can do for people.
Yeah, and the thing that most people don't understand is what a webinar truly is at the heart and soul of marketing. Okay. A webinar is the most, in my opinion, it's the most effective form of content marketing. But people don't understand that it's still content marketing. Like, it's designed to push them up from the bottom of your marketing awareness pyramid all the way up to the top. And so you have to educate them. Like, if you're doing just straight pitching, you're missing out on the rest of the pyramid. But if you educate them, you lead them to having them come up with their own solution. You lead them to coming up with their own self-discoveries of why your system is so important, why they need SEO. Like, that's going to be way more effective than if you're just saying, here's why I'm different, here's what I do. But it is content marketing at its finest.
I love that. Question here. What's a good selling percentage? Maybe you don't know this, but what's a good selling percentage for a product that is below $500? I know you typically said you do around 1,000. Have you done any below product offerings under 500? And is there a good, closing percentage that you've seen?
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that because it wouldn't be 100% accurate. We've done it before, but I don't have enough data to say like, okay, this is a good percentage, this is a bad percentage.
Got it. Makes sense. Let's see. Have you productized your webinar service, or do you always do custom projects with commission-based paying?
Yeah, I have a course and software that I've productized. We were doing some promotions of it earlier this year, but the webinar agency side, the done for you client stuff, really took off. So I kind of put that on the back burner. So I promote it on shows like this, or just, via one-on-one conversations, but it's called the Webinar Accelerator. And, it's a $1,000 program, and it comes with SlideSell, which is our custom built software, which is the template that we use, which is pretty sweet. I'm really excited about it. It was a big project that I worked on last year, but that's my official first software launch that I've done many years after I tried to do it the first time.
Yeah, no, congratulations. Doing the software thing is a big thing. It means you've worked through something really, really tough. So yeah, and also guys, thewebinaragency.com is the website to go to if you do want to do a custom project. I know you said you're pretty full right now with audits, but I'm definitely going to get my webinar audited with you guys. I'm excited to move forward there. So if you guys are looking for that custom stuff, go there too. What was the URL for the productized software plus slides?
Yeah. Okay. So the URL for that is called jointhewebinaraccelerator.com/go. And if you want to see my auto webinar that runs, it's the same base URL, but it's the slug is /now. So if you want to go to the sales page, it's /go, or if you go to the auto webinar, it's /now.
Cool. I just put the links in there, guys. Hopefully I didn't mess those up. But yeah, there you go. Alvaro says, do you think phone conversations would be the perfect follow-up to close sales after a high-ticket webinar presentation?
100%. Yes, 100%. My buddy Scott Oldford, I'm not sure if you know him, David, but he just did a high-ticket webinar to a Facebook Messenger bot, and that sparked like 90 or 100 conversations, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But if you're just getting started out and you sell services, like, you definitely want to get on the phone because it's higher closing percentage. Like, when you get to productized stuff and you're selling your info products, or you're selling, sub 500, you're selling your products on a webinar, like under $1,000, you want to figure out how to reduce the number of touch points, personal touch points that you need to make a sale. But when you're above that, phone calls are the way to go, in my opinion.
And I totally agree, Alvaro. I think I used to do high ticket client sales too, back before Demio. And it's such a good way, because with high ticket sales, like, a lot of the sales cycles that we had were 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And that's basically a meeting, going through a proposal, reviewing the proposal. Like, these companies that are looking at the high tickets, there's a lot of questions and a lot of objections that come up. Is this the right product? I'm spending a lot of money. Are we going to see an ROI? How fast are we going to see an ROI? Is this the right person to do it for us? Is this the right objective to do right now in our business, right? They need a lot of questions answered. So the webinar is a great, like you said before, Joel, a great content marketing piece to educate them, answer a lot of those objections early on, but you still want to build some of that follow-up personal relationships. Now, doing a webinar plus with a closing conversation is a great way to take that 3-4 week selling cycle and reduce it into a night. Obviously, you have like a pre-webinar sequence, so it might be like a week. But that's so much of that is automated that it's like you literally can make these high ticket sales in a night. That's amazing. That's crazy. So definitely get on the call, build the conversation, build the relationship. People buy from those they know, like, and trust. So that's what you're trying to do. You're building the relationships on the webinar, prior to the webinar, and then on the call as well. Christian asks, are you using ClickFunnels for some of yours?
I am. Yep. I'm using, so we tested out a bunch of auto webinar platforms. I would love to test Demio. Do you guys have an auto webinar yet? Or is it coming? I can't remember what
automated. We have the evergreen like live replays. Fully automated may come down the pipeline in the future. Just kind of an idea that we're kind of kicking around is whether or not fully automated webinars can actually degrade an experience like this, a live webinar experience where people get to be on live. But that's kind of
cool.
what we're kicking.
Yeah, so we tested some automated webinar platforms, ClickFunnels, EverWebinar. My auto webinar that we sent the link to is on ClickFunnels. So I use ClickFunnels for all my pages and membership sites and whatnot. And that's to answer your question. Yes, I do use it.
Awesome. Alvaro asked about software for scheduling. I use what's it called?
Calendly.
Calendly. Thank you. Couldn't remember. Yeah, I just Calendly, and then I just add them into Demio, and then I just run one-on-one demos through Demio. Awesome. Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, Christian, he says, yes, he uses ClickFunnels over Stealth Seminar. And Alvaro, yeah, Calendly is from Google. It's really, really good, really amazing. Guys, did I miss any other questions? If you have a question, go ahead, type it in. I might have missed it. We have about 3 minutes left. I want to make sure I respect everyone's time, including yours, Joel. So we'll end here in just about 3 minutes. Let me ask you this. What would be the last, maybe just if you could go back and you could take everything you knew with the webinar agency that you've learned, what would you say would be your biggest piece of advice to yourself starting again if you were starting over?
Oh, man, good question. It would be figuring out how to scale this much bigger than we are. We've done a lot of work, but we're still limited on scale. The problem with done for you services is, unless you want to build a massive team, like scaling all is completely dependent on how big your team is. And I'd say if I were to start over from scratch, I would hire copywriters much earlier on than we did. Because I was the technician in the beginning, which, you kind of have to wear all hats in the beginning. But I needed to teach other people how to do what I do in my brain. Like I'm very, very good. I'm the best at writing webinars, like in the business, hands down, but terrible at helping to train other copywriters. Like, so that was the reason why I created SlideSell, was to put my copywriters through that, because every slide has a tutorial of like what the psychology is behind the slide, why we're putting this here, and it gives an example. So to go back to when I first started, I would hire a copywriter right out the gate, because it takes me about 40 to 50 hours to write a webinar. Like, that's how much work goes into it.
Got it. That totally makes sense. All right, couple questions I'll try to sneak in here quickly. Packtree, you're asking for a list of questions he asked potential clients. I think that's probably pretty personal to his business, but there's plenty of resources online that you can look up for qualifying questions. So I would definitely recommend just Googling that one. Can you speak more about client-centric stuff? Have you done anything in, let me see, Asa, you asked where this question was. Have you done anything in the self-help personal development space? Any work in there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're doing 2 webinars right now. We're just finishing them up. And it's the hardest niche that I've ever had to write a webinar for. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but which is completely cool. But like self-help is like, how do you explain, I call it woo-woo because like I haven't really gotten big into the personal development space, but like when you get into and you talk to an expert, like they've all got their own, oh man, I had this one coaching client a while ago who, he was trying to build his business with the webinar, and his message was how to turn your passion into a paycheck. And he was this big meditation guy. And I'm just like you have to come up with something different, because like, that's not telling anybody anything. Like turning your passion into a paycheck is like
generalistic.
Yeah, it's unrealistic, and it doesn't explain anything. And some of my other clients, like we've had a really hard time crafting the message of like, okay, I understand how you help transform people's lives. We had to put it into a system. We had to package it into a system, and we had to use like a billion analogies, because that was the only way that it's the best way that you can explain something, but like it takes a lot of brain power to come up with analogies that make sense for all of the custom tailored stories that we were trying to explain. But yeah, I might have to charge more for self-help webinars because that was a bear. Like it was a lot of work.
There's also a lot of competition in that space, and there's a lot of ideas already taken, so you have to be really creative. Have you seen effective, I'm taking this from Asa's question, have you seen effective call to actions or offerings specific to niches, or are you typically seeing like certain packaged offerings working best across the board? Is it like membership sites, coaching? I mean, or does it really depend on the pain point you're solving?
Yeah, good question. The thing that you have to really understand is not to just throw crap into a package if it doesn't add value. Like the way that we build our offer packages is very, very strategic. And it's not like we say, okay, you've got this program, this program, this program. You want to package it into one thing. It's like, no, like every core component of your offer has to solve a different problem. Like if you are building, like let's just say, because I built 5 of these webinars, like with Amazon, how to make money with Amazon, right? The first one is, we had this one course, which was, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it was like, okay, here's the course, like here's the system for, how you sell products on Amazon that they were teaching. Mm-hmm. Then we had another component, which was like how to drive traffic. Then we had another component, which was like how to get reviews. Like those are 3 separate components that complement each other. But what I see a lot of people doing, and this is hurting your conversions more than anything else, is, okay, here's the videos. Then as a bonus, I'm going to give you PDFs. Then as a bonus, I'm going to give you an Excel sheet. And it's like, no, like it's all the same stuff. Like they're selling all the same stuff, but repurposed. And you can't, I mean, you can, but it's not going to be effective. But, they have to scratch another itch. And they have to complement each other. So that's how we package up all of our services and offers. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can think about how you repackage and what complements. One of the things that I did, Asa, for our offering was I try to think of where are the struggle points? Once people come into the program, where are they going to struggle with? And once you understand like where else they could possibly have a hard time, then the bonuses can be, how can we remove that? Because if your product is to solve a pain point, it should solve everything, right? So that's how you can kind of bundle if you're doing an offer there. Spencer, just to answer your last question, he was asking about high ticket sales of 5,000 to 6,000. Would you do an audience size of people with an income more than 100K? I would say maybe, but I think it's a very complicated. Hey, Joel, just found it. I think it's a very.
I was wondering where this chat box was, but I just found it. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a complicated question, Spencer, and I think it's complicated because I don't know if you're doing B2C. Who's the person that's making the buying decision? Is that person like, just because someone's making an income of 100K, is that the pain point to them? Is it to their family? Is it to their wife? Is it someone that they're trying to improve on in their life? Like you got to really think about who that person is. I think a 5 to 6K product in a B2C, someone with B2C, they're going to have to make 100K or over, like, unless the pain is so big, like think about medical stuff, right? Like you're doing, a cancer treatment or something like that, that's what, 20, like, I don't know. This is a really bad example. I don't know. Some treatment could be $25,000, $30,000, $50,000, right? They're going to pay for it because the pain is so high that they have to buy it. So it really depends on what your pain is of your product that you're selling or servicing. If it's a nice to have, like you're just selling them a gadget, it might be kind of hard. You might have to go above that. So I think that's going to be some market research and also some testing. Mm-hmm. But cool, guys. I really appreciate all of you guys coming out. As always, you're all rock stars. I just checked it out. We also got to about 128 registrants, so we're going to do $128 to the Susan G. Komen charity right after this show. I want to thank you guys all for registering. Joel, thank you so much for your time, man. It was an absolute pleasure.
Dude, thanks for having me on. I had a blast. We had a lot of good comments and a lot of good interaction. So I enjoyed doing it, man. Thanks for having me on.
You're so welcome. Love having you on too. It was great. Thank you, everybody. Talk to everyone soon. Bye.
See ya.